Should be recording now. Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much, Russell, for joining us today. I'm Janine Pipe. I'm an author, reviewer, podcaster, editor, just about everything at the moment. And Ken got in touch with me from Silver Shamrock, and he asked if Ben and I would host a series of interviews for some of the authors that have got work coming out at the moment. I think this is, are we number 5 now, Ben? Is that right? Yep. So we've spoken to quite a few of you guys, and we've got a whole year's worth of people to try and get through. So Ken's making us work for our money. And I am joined by the very lovely Ben. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, I'm Ben. Don't have as many credits as Janine yet, but book reviewer and book blogger, and also writing for the sites Beyond the Veil and Puzzle Box Horror.
Lovely. And today our victim, as I like to say, is Russell James. So thank you very much. And our first question is, as always, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and how you got into writing?
Well, I was raised in New York and went to college there. I spent 5 years in the Army flying helicopters once I got out of college, and then I went to work as a technical writer and trainer for a Fortune 50 company. And while I was doing that, I started to get into writing. And what would happen is my wife and I, if we were on a long car trip, I would say, you know, what would be a really good story is if this happened and this happened, something I had thought through in my head. And she would sit there very patiently. And after several dozen of those, she said, you know what you should do? You should write these down and get them published. And I said, no, that's crazy. No one will ever pay money to read anything I've written. So she was right about that, and I hear about it all the time now. So that's what got the ball rolling.
Awesome. Did you always have this like storytelling streak in you, or is that something that kind of came about later in life?
I was interested in writing stories in high school, but it didn't seem, there never seemed to be time to do it. You start going to college and you're really busy, and then you're working, and then it was something that I guess percolated and just came to a boil at one point.
Yeah.
I started doing more serious writing about 2001, and I had a couple of short stories published, and then my first novel got published in 2011. So,
okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of once I agreed with my wife that I would give it a try, see if I could get somebody else to read this. There were some online courses that I took, you know, with groups where you practice and get your writing in, learn more about the craft. I had a coach, a personal coach that I had, coached me through some writing ideas, and a whole lot of feedback like that. And I got a couple of short stories published, which was very nice, you know, because of all the rejections that you get for everything else. So that helps keep you going, like, okay, maybe I can do this. So that was the long process. So.
Was it always going to be horror? Was that always what you wrote?
I think that one of the reasons that it ended up being horror was that the first books I read that were fiction, that I read without ceasing, where I could pick the book up and put it back down 4 hours later and say, what happened to the day, was Stephen King. So I think that set a tone. When he could hit that chord with me, it seemed like that is what I'd like to hit, that same chord with someone else.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Is your wife always right?
Because this is recorded, yes. Yes. She is always right.
All right, so we're just going to jump straight into talking a little bit about your latest release that's coming out from Silver Shamrock, and then I want to go back and maybe ask you about some of your older books as well. But the new one out, I think it was March 30th. It just dropped, so fairly recently.
Yes, just on the 30th it came out.
Yeah, awesome. Farallon Island, what can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was inspired to write this story when I went to the National Maritime Museum, which is in San Francisco, and it's right on the bay. And it had a display about Farallon Island. And it's an island, it's 27 miles off the coast in the Pacific Ocean. And it is rocky, it is barren, it's very small. And the only thing on it is a lighthouse because of the reef and the rocks that are all around it. And so lighthouse keepers have to live there. So there's the lighthouse, there's a couple of buildings for them to live in, and that's it. And I thought, of course, horror writer, oh, what a great place to terrorize people.
Yes.
So I started thinking about, all right, well, if that's there, what kind of problems could they have? What kind of supernatural things could go on? And it was a good setting because of the isolation, that it is way out there and the weather's usually terrible. So that got it started. And then I did some research on it, and big research was this book here, which is great if you want to get something on Farallon Island. And it's called The Farallon Islands. It's by Peter White. And it has the whole history of it from the first lighthouse that was put on in the late 1800s through the last lighthouse keepers that lived there when everything got automated. I think it was in the 1950s or 60s. So as I was reading through this, I tried to find a good time period that would work, and the 1930s worked out as just right, and that got the ball rolling on writing this story.
Awesome.
And that leads nicely into my next question, which is about it being set in the Prohibition era. And what kind of research you did for that, because and I'm glad you said so. That was the 30s, was it? Because that's a very American history, isn't it? So I was thinking, yes. I'm not sure. We didn't have anything like that in the UK. So how did you research all of that?
Well, as I read through the book, I was trying to think what would a good time period be to set this, and the earliest lighthouse keepers that were there. I couldn't plausibly get a big group of people there or a very diverse group of people there because of how they recruited people for the lighthouse.
Right.
So as I looked and I saw the people that were living there in the 1930s, at that point, you could bring your family, which you can imagine, why would you not? I mean, just, I'm going to go live on a lighthouse. We'll catch you and the kids later. So there were families there. Plus, at that point, everybody there wasn't homogenous. So I was able to get characters in there that were immigrants. I have a Chinese immigrant who is out there, which was a big deal on the West Coast in the 30s, and someone who had immigrated from Mexico. So it's a good mix. I could have the families out there, and that's going to give me a lot of different reactions to the demon that one of the children accidentally releases from a cave that starts all the terror going. So but that's great. And in 1930, they still were only resupplied once every 2 weeks. So, and you didn't call for an extra boat and say, oh, hey, I forgot something. Could you give it to me? And they had some radio communication, but it wasn't very good. Mm-hmm. So that was much better than picking a later time when you could call and anybody could drop by. And
of course, yeah. They really were isolated. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen the fairly recent film, The Lighthouse?
No, I haven't seen that.
Because I was trying to figure out what are my reference points for lighthouses, because I don't have very many. And I saw that movie, which I felt like did a good job of kind of like the isolation and the madness that can happen for the people that live there, and that are pretty much just them by themselves. And then the other one was, oh yeah, The Lighthouse from Annihilation. That doesn't really count. But but I felt like, the island, and that just seems like a perfect setting for a story like this. And I like that you thought about the time period in so as far as wanting to have these diverse characters. Is that something that you usually think about when you're writing a story? Like what kinds of diverse characters can I have? Or is that something, more specifically, since you were doing it in such an isolated setting, you wanted a way to be able to kind of have more going on?
Well, when I look at the characters, I think everyone has a part to play in the story. And if everyone plays the same part, then that's a pretty boring story. So the more different I can make the characters, the more different their reaction is going to be. So as an example here, the Mexican character who's here, he's brought his family with him, and he's signed up because he's lost his farm. It's the Depression. So he lost his farm. He has nothing. This is a job. And he's got to come out. He's got to bring his family with him because he can't leave them there. But he has come from a background that he's never even seen the ocean before. So he is a total, no pun intended, fish out of water on this island with his family, and his background doesn't relate to that at all, as opposed to the former ship's captain who's here. He's totally at ease with this environment and bad weather and huge thunderstorms and all that. I mean, he's on an island that beats being on a boat, so he's better there. So I could get all those and then get different reactions from them because their motivations and what's important to each of them is going to be totally different. And that helps with more conflict. So it's going to build something into the story. I hope.
Yeah. Your another book that came out recently, although I know it was supposed to come out a long time ago, The Portal,
Yes.
from Flame Tree Press.
That's right.
It also has an island setting, correct?
That's right.
And so is that something that, I know you grew up maybe on Long Island, or you're from Long Island.
That's correct.
Are you just have an interest in islands? Like what's up with all these islands, Russell?
Yeah.
I do, and I'm going to trip myself up later and talk about another island. But this, so yeah, The Portal was written a while ago, had a pretty torturous travel before it finally got published. And that's set on a microcosm of where I grew up on Long Island. So if you look, Long Island is south of Connecticut, and the Long Island Sound is in between the two. And there are a series of smaller islands out east that are in between Long Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, out in that area. And there's actually vacation spots like that. Martha's Vineyard is an example of someplace like that. So there's that was kind of the setting that I wanted to have for that story, so that there the larger group of the town ends up being the one that gets put under the thumb. That's where all the impact comes. In The Portal, the devil has returned to Stone Harbor, and there is a portal that will open to hell that was there, and it was almost opened by a coven of witches back in the 1700s when witches were in their heyday back then in the New England, but they didn't quite make it, and there's a 300-year cycle. And 300 years are up, and he's back. So he shows up. He starts bringing a whole bunch of people in. He has some tremendous powers, especially over animals. And he's got an in on people who've made a deal. A lot of people made deals with the devil that they didn't think they'd ever have to pay back. And payback starts happening. So a lot of good chaos going on at The Portal. But because they're isolated by ferry service, and that's a real thing, that those islands do use that, and it's very busy in the summer, but in the winter they go down to just the minimum we need for the few people that still are there. So that was a good isolation location there.
Cool.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I have a copy of it here, and it's been on. Pretty sure that Glenn Rolfe really likes this, and he's mentioned it to me before. I know I have to read it. It's on my, as you can see, most of the books on here are also on my TBR, so I might get to it in like 10 years. Okay, right, this is one I've been looking forward to asking you about. So I absolutely love Don. I've managed to interview Don Dory a couple of times, and he's such a great man. So you came up through Samhain, but what can you tell us about that and working with Don, and obviously back with him at Flame Tree as well? What can you tell us about your experience?
Well, when I was doing one of the online classes to learn how to write, I had the teacher came and said, okay, everybody, just letting you know there's an open call at a new publisher that's called Samhain, and it's for horror, and the editor is Don Doria, which is like, yes, you don't even have to explain who he is. I mean, the guy's history goes back, horror master. Yeah. I mean, the people he's signed and the people he's discovered is unreal. And he's running it, and you don't need an agent, and you can send in a manuscript. Well, during this class, I've been using everything they taught me to try to fix this manuscript for my book that had been rejected or ignored. It's hard to tell when you're doing the things, okay, right? So I either got rejections or ignorance from all these different places, but now I think I've honed it into something, and it's sitting there, and I thought, you know what? I haven't been rejected by anybody famous yet. So you know what'd be cool? I'm going to get rejected by like one of the kings of one of the king editors in all of horror. So I sent it in, and of course, this was so long ago that it was on paper, right? So I sent it in on paper, and then one day I got a letter in the mail, and I'm opening it up, and it says, "Hi, it's Don Doria. I've accepted your manuscript for the book." And I was in such shock. I mean, I literally went straight to my knees in my living room just looking at this, you know. And of course, my first thought is, this is one of my friends playing a trick on me. But I found out, no, it really was true. And that's ended up being Dark Inspiration. So this was that first novel that Don bought. He's amazing to work with. I had the first one that I had, didn't get a lot of editorial feedback on it. And I got some, and I said, is that normal? And he said, well, usually he doesn't give a lot because he won't take it. If it needs that much work, there's too many good manuscripts out there to invest in. So he said normally. And when he does give feedback, it is spot on. I mean, you can't argue with it. It's very specific, and he'll give you examples. Now, this story doesn't do this because the reader is going to be looking for this type of satisfaction out of what you're writing, and what you're writing isn't going to give it. So it's going to need to have this element, or it's going to need to have that element, and you're listening and saying, "Wow, it's." Yeah, you don't argue. It's like, you're right. I got to do that. And you go back, and because it's so spot on, I'm very enthusiastic when I'm taking that feedback and then I'm putting it into place because I know how much better it's going to be.
Yeah.
So he's in person. He's a fantastic guy just to meet and to socialize with at a convention and something like that. And then to work with, he's phenomenal. So I'm very happy. I was so sad when Samhain closed down because we had such a good stable of authors there, and the books were terrific. It's just a tough marketplace. I mean, this was the beginning of Amazon becoming Amazon, and a lot of people got Amazoned out. So when he was signed at Flame Tree, I was so excited, and I had the portal was finished and looking for a home. And I said, this might seem familiar because you saw it when we were at Samhain. And he remembered and he liked it. And that got to be the first book I put out at Flame Tree. So it was a good story, and it's great. I hope it's got a long term at Flame Tree so we can keep putting out more books like The Portal and The Playing Card Killer.
Awesome. So where are your books that were with Samhain? Have you put them out with other publishers, or?
right now, Samhain, when they shut down, were really good to us. Everybody got paid everything that they were due, and everyone got their rights reverted right away. And credit goes to the publisher there, that she knew as a writer herself, she knew that, and she put us atop of the list. So and I had everything. It was all formatted. I got to buy all the covers for a very low price, so I bought the same covers, and Amazon was pretty easy to republish everything since it didn't need anything. So those are all out, self-published through Amazon right now.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Did you so you started, before pitching that to Dawn way back when, you're with this writing group. Is being a part of a writing group something you've continued to do over the years, or did you kind of leave that behind as you started publishing more books?
Yes. In fact, I took, when the class I was in, as it was getting done, I thought, geez, I'd really like to have a critique group, but I don't see anybody starting one. And then I realized, oh wait, stupid, you could start the critique group. Okay. So I invited 5 or 6 people who were in that class who I thought I liked their writing, their style a lot, and asked them to come in. And we started our own critique group that, with a monthly rotation, and everybody put in a story each month, and we would give each other feedback. And we're still doing it since 2011, and it's great. It's a fantastic group of people. One of them is Teresa Robeson, and since we started that group, she's had 2 children's books published that have been very successful. One of them was called the Queen of Physics, and one of them is called 2 Bicycles in Beijing, I think is the second title. And they're wonderful. And other folks have had short stories published. And just to see all of us get together when we were nobody, and now all of us having different levels of success as we move forward, and everybody doing that is fantastic. So they're a great group of folks, and love them.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you're not all horror writers then? If she's got...
Oh, okay. I'm trying to convince them, but I can't bring them over to the dark side completely. Even though they'll write something and I'll say, this is a horror story, right? No, it's not. Yeah, you've couched it as like a fantasy fairy tale thing, but no, it's not. So, but I'm trying to bring them in.
Yeah. All right, so this just popped in my head, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. I was exploring your website earlier. Lots of great content on there, and the way you write is just cracking me up. So your comments and little things like that. But I was scrolling through all the books that you've written and just looking at all the titles and covers and all that stuff. And there's a pretty wide variety of things. And then I feel like my eye caught one that said it was a YA fantasy. Is that okay? So you also have branched out a little bit from horror, or is it also horror?
I had this inspiration to write that story, which was set in the Florida Keys, and it's called Mirza Anselmo and the City Beneath the City. And there's a girl living in the Florida Keys with her mother, never has known her father. And as she's in high school, she finds out quite violently that she is half mermaid. And the reason that she's never known her father is that he came ashore during a king tide, which is when they're allowed to, when they can have legs and walk on shore, and had a liaison with her mother and then left. And of course, she can't explain that to her daughter, but she does find this out. And then she gets the chance to decide, do I want to stay here with my mother, which has been a really rough relationship with her because her mother has some serious mental issues, or do I want to go live a totally new life under the sea, which seems pretty alluring. But as she finds out and gets involved with that, she realizes that there's a lot more going on down here than I ever thought about. And now she's in the middle of a fight between the descendants of Atlantis, who have become mermaids, and the descendants of satyrs, who are still on Earth, still living like human beings, and the conflicts that they had. So I thought that was an interesting story, so I put that together, and that I ended up self-publishing that because that made the rounds and nothing happened. And I thought, well, this will be good. I do a lot of conventions, and some of the conventions are sci-fi type conventions, which a lot of horror folks go to, and it does pretty well selling there. A lot of fantasy readers pick it up. So,
sure.
Oh, I like some of that.
Sorry, I just had to ask. That one popped out at me when I was scrolling. So you, are there any, because you've also, I mean, within horror, it seems like you've written a fairly wide variety of story types, and there's it looks like a series maybe about a paleontologist, and those look awesome. I definitely want to go get those because there's like dragons and giant crabs and dinosaurs, kind of fun stuff. It sounds amazing.
Awesome. There are 2 series that are published through Severed Press, and one of them is with. Oh yeah, their covers are amazing.
Definitely,
and, they've cornered the kaiju giant monster niche in horror and sci-fi. So one of them is about Professor Grant Coleman, and he is a paleontologist, and he somehow keeps getting roped into getting onto expeditions that end up finding some kinds of giant monsters. And those books are more adventure type stories than straight horror. They're in the way that a Godzilla movie or a King Kong is an adventure rather than horror. And those are also written specifically at a PG-13 type level. The language isn't dumbed down and the storylines aren't dumbed down, but there's no language and there's no sexual content in any of it, so they can go to a much broader audience. And I've got 5 or 6 of the Grant Coleman stories, and then on the other, also from there, I have a series with a national park ranger named Kathy West and her partner, Ranger Nathan Toland. And they are national park rangers who find out that the national park system was not just created to save these beautiful places in the United States for everyone to look at. They were created because something very dangerous is in certain locations, and we need to build a park around them to keep people out. So they start to discover some issues that they've got, and they end up fighting giant crabs in Key West, out of Key West in the Dry Tortugas. There's a national park there. They fight fire-breathing dragons at Volcanoes National Park in Hawaii. And in an upcoming story...
I'm sold. It sounds amazing.
Then in an upcoming story, there's killer ravens living in the middle of Yellowstone National Park. So they're doing that. So that's fun because those have a very strong historical base to them. And I want to keep that right. And I want to keep the park right. So I have to set myself limits of what actually happened in the park's history and what's the layout of the park and what really lives there and what does it feel like and all that. So I think those limitations help with the storytelling because you have to think so much harder if you're going to say, okay, if I've got giant crabs out here at far off Key West, then what was this fort, which is Fort Jefferson, which is out there? What's the history of this fort? When would the giant crabs have shown up? And I'm able to pick pieces of history that make my conspiracy theory work, which gives me a whole new level of appreciation for all the crazy conspiracy theory people out there if they do that much work to come up with theirs. So it's fun.
I'm hearing Key West, Severed Press, and giant crabs, and I am no joke going to download that straight away after this because
I think amazing. You'll like it. It's a good. It's exciting and it's a fun romp. So
definitely. Well, so that means that you're with Hunter Shea for Silver Shamrock, Severed Press, and Flame Tree, and of course you and Hunter came up through Samhain together as well. So
yes, I've been following him like a stalker from publisher to publisher. So, I mean, I figure, hey, if they're good enough for Hunter Shea, I'm in, right?
Definitely.
So, he does great work. I love his stories.
Oh, Hunter's amazing, and he's just blurbed my new collection, so yay!
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah, and Brian Keane as well just blurbed my collection, so and Glenn wrote the foreword, so I've got all the big guys on board.
You have everybody in your corner.
Yeah. I sure do.
Yeah, right, will be doing this podcast alone very quickly.
Yeah, I know, she's gonna leave me. Just me in my empty room.
That's it.
It's your go, Ben, I think.
Okay, well, I keep thinking of questions we didn't write down. Well, actually, to quickly go back, kind of, I guess. So, you know, these kind of adventure stories that you're writing, and I like what you were saying too about the having that historical, and it kind of makes you think more about it. And you're also, I mean, you're flexing a lot of kind of creative muscles as well, it seems like, with the different types of stories that you're writing or that you've written. Are there any genres that you haven't really dipped your toes in yet that you kind of would like to, or any other kind of historical settings that you're interested in exploring?
Right now, I'm looking at I've got a finished manuscript that's historical horror set during World War II, and that's a group of people that are brought together who don't have any superpowers or anything like that, but they're there to keep the SS from gathering supernatural items that they can use in the Reich. So that's a fun one that I'm putting together. And I have another story. It's about half done. It's set in California in 1870, I think. I got to go look it back up again. But it's set in the California mission system, which the Spanish government set up to populate California. And they went out and they put a series of 21, I think, missions up the coast, and they were populated by a small contingent of the military and Franciscan priests who were there to convert the locals and that kind of thing. And what I've done is taken that and turned that on its side and said that the missions weren't set up for that reason in real life, that in reality, demons were possessing people up through the California coast and working their way down to Mexico. And when they found out that this is where everyone's coming from, that's why they sent religious people up there. Because really, does that make sense? I mean, if I'm going to populate a place, is that my priority? So that's a nice historical demon possession type story that I'm working on. That hopefully that'll see the light of day at some point.
Awesome. Those both sound cool. I was going to say, you know, when you were talking, maybe, you know, your stories are real. I'm going to be excited, and I'm also going to learn something. And I was like, well, maybe, I don't know, if you're twisting it right.
It'll be against your will, but you'll learn something. So.
Right, yeah. But just having that research, you know, and that historical setting and all of that, it's really cool. All right, changing gears a little bit. So who are some of your personal favorite authors, and how have they influenced your own writing?
Well, anybody who writes horror and doesn't say that, you know, they were influenced by Stephen King and Dean Koontz and that whole generation of horror authors is lying. So I'm not going to lie and say that didn't happen. Most of my current reading that I do now is among the authors from the presses that I'm publishing with, because not that I look at them as like I'm competing with them, but they're representing that publisher, and I need to be that good, right? Because that's what the expectation for those folks. So out of Silver Shamrock, I read Catherine Cavendish. She had the Malin Witch come out with them, just terrific. She is, you know, the queen of Gothic horror. I have never read something bad that she's put out, and they're captivating. I've read Somer Cannon, also has a book out with them that's next on my TBR list, that she and Wesley Southard have Slaves of Gravity out. That's next on my Kindle. I like her writing a lot. Brian Moreland has a book coming out. He also published with Samhain. He's got some good, he does good historical background on his stories also, and they are brutal. And so I like reading his. Out of we mentioned Hunter Shea. Can't not read anything Hunter writes, whether it's for Silver Shamrock, whether it's for Severed Press, Flame Tree, all great stuff. And also out of the last couple I've read from Flame Tree, I've gotten out off NetGalley, and one of them is, the last one is, I think it's the Nirvana Experiment from Brian Pinkerton.
Oh,
and
okay.
he was writing good horror, and he's kind of transitioned. The last two books here have been near future sci-fi thrillers, and they've both been really good. And I think his Nirvana Experiment comes out pretty soon, and it's near future, and it's terrifying because everything in it you really think is going to happen tomorrow. So
Right.
so that's who I stick with. I watch those, the publishers, all the authors are really good, and I just try to see if I can pedal fast enough to keep up with all of them.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay, the second question that I was most excited for. Can you tell us a little bit about your love of Walt Disney World? Is that, and how did that start? How did you get into Disney?
Okay. Well, since you're not from America, I'll brief you on some of the Disney background, okay, that goes with that. So in 1971, Disney World opened up, and I'm a child of an age that I won't share with everybody. And Disney promoted the heck out of this on a TV program that was on every Sunday called The Wonderful World of Disney. And they would show Disney things, and Walt would sit behind his desk and tell you about all the great things that are going to happen in Disney World and behind the scenes and all of that. So in 1971, my parents took us down to Disney World, and it was amazing, and it lived up to all my expectations as a little kid. It was just loads of fun. Well, now I live in Central Florida, so I'm 45 minutes from Disney World. So I thought a pass. And, it's a great that, I'll be writing and get to something and finish a section or finish a book or finish a project. And that's a great place to go for the day, pretend you're a tourist, have fun, go ride some rides, have some great lunch there, and, spend the day. So it's a good time.
Are you an annual pass holder then?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can make it worthwhile financially.
Yeah.
It's really expensive on a one-day-a-day kind of thing.
Oh,
so.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm so envious.
I've never actually been. I just somehow missed, that growing up. Haven't done it and still haven't done it yet. I've got little kids of my own, so maybe that's, in the near future to experience. But Janine is like the biggest Disney World fan that I know, actually.
Do you go often?
Well, as often as we can from the UK. So last year was meant to be our 10th trip, so it's not too bad. Yeah, and we've got it booked again for hopefully for December. This is like the third time we've had to rebook, obviously, because we weren't allowed to go to America and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, as much as we can say that we are Disney fans, we are pretty big. In so much so as well that my daughter's actually been in one of the unofficial guides to Walt Disney as well. Have you ever seen the guidebooks that like Len Tester does?
Yes.
Yeah, the unofficial guides. Well, the one that's for kids, Walt Disney World for kids. My daughter is one of the Disney kids. So yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, so we are pretty big. So this is obviously all my horror stuff behind me for now, but downstairs I've got the equivalent in like all the DVDs and the guidebooks and memorabilia and stuff. So yeah,
you're hooked. So that's good.
Yeah, well and truly hooked.
Well, the parks are open, everybody's masked and social distanced, and they've limited the number of people that they'll let in every day so that it doesn't get too dense. So the reservations do fill up. But if you're, if you go there and you're staying at the park, then you're first on the list. So you're going to go get in. They lock you in. So, and it's actually, there's some nice things about it. I like being 6 feet away from the next person in line waiting to get on Dumbo.
Yes.
I mean, it's better to be around it. And they implemented where you can, all of your meals, when you go, you don't stand in line for it. You use your smartphone app and say, this is what I want. And then they tell you it's done and you walk in and pick it up. I mean, that's definitely nice. Yeah, they can keep both of those things after we stop being sick, and I'll be fine.
Okay, favorite park, favorite ride, and then we'll move on because Ben's getting bored.
I'll have to say that the Hollywood Studios new ride of the Rise of the Resistance is the best theme park ride I have ever been on. It is.
We can't wait.
So completely seamless, and it's a little. Right now, they cut some things out of it to keep people distanced. So some of the original opening where you're waiting to go and start the ride, and they brief you on what's going on. There's some things that are rushed, and they rush you through a few things, but the technology is amazing, and you absolutely feel from the moment you step in that you are in the Star Wars world. You can't tell. So you will love it and say, I have to get back on that ride immediately.
Can't wait. I mean, I like Star Tours, and so if this is like elevated Star Tours, then amazing.
It's and a lot less physically violent than Star Tours. But
it's not a ride if you don't feel sick coming off.
They do like Mission to Mars, so good.
Oh, Mission to Mars is not good.
That's the only ride that I got off of, and I felt physically ill the rest of the day. I mean, the G-forces on that were more than I was ready for. So.
Oh yeah, and the only other ride that I can't do is actually the teacups.
I don't do any spinning, so I can do roller coasters. Inverted loops, corkscrews, all of that is fine, but spinning means you're going to see my lunch, and you don't want to see it. And I've only seen it once, so I'm good. So
I'm exactly the same. Whereas my child, my daughter and husband don't mind, so they go off and do like Alice's teacups, and I'll be like, I'll meet you up by Gaston's. I'll be getting a cinnamon bun or something.
I'll take pictures of you while you're on it. Have fun.
That's it. Okay, sorry, Ben.
No, it's fine. I don't know exactly what all that means, but I like roller coasters and I like Star Wars, so we're good.
Yeah. You've got to take your kids. Well, it's expensive, so you better start saving like last year. But
make sure that they're tall enough to get on the rides. There's like 46 inches or 48 inches or whatever that is, or they'll be disappointed when they get up to get excited and the hand goes here and they're like, sorry, son, because they cut no slack.
Yeah, that is something we talked about. You know, we want to do those kinds of things with them, but make sure they're old enough to be able to do it and maybe remember it, and enjoy it. All right, so to take it back a little bit, actually, I want to go back to Farallon Island, if that's all right. And, so you have this setting and you're doing the research for it, and you have, maybe an idea of the general outline of it. How much more do you do before you start writing everything out? Like, are you one of those writers that likes to plan everything, or are you just kind of like, I have an idea, I'm going to dive into it?
I'm definitely a seat of the pants writer. So I'll have some general ideas about the story and what might happen, and then I just start writing from there and see where it goes. And it's an incredibly inefficient way to write because you spend a lot of time thinking about stuff and a lot of times throwing away things you've already written. But That's how it works for me. And then while I'm writing and I have ideas about what I want, about something that might happen in the future, then at the bottom I'll just create a new heading that says chapter XX, and then write in, in this chapter Grant Coleman meets the Tyrannosaurus, because I know that that's going to happen in the future. So that kind of, I don't have an outline, but I have plot points that I don't want to forget about. And then I'll have those written out, and then I'll catch up with those plot points. And hopefully by the time I get there, the rest of the story's shown up somewhere.
Yeah, that seems to be working for you. So, why change it? So like with Farallon Island, no spoilers, but for the setting and the smaller, I guess, cast of characters, there's still fairly high levels of violence and things that happen. So are those things that you kind of like, you're just writing it and you're like, it just pops into your head like this is going to happen to this character now, or had you kind of like planned to have it happen the way that it did? If that makes sense.
I usually have something in general. For example, there's a really good scene where the ship's captain, who has a very tortured past, goes up to the lighthouse and in a storm. And that was going to be pretty simple. He gets up to the lighthouse, but on the way there, I started thinking about what tricks that's going to play with his mind and the problems that he has. And that ended up being a really spooky scene. And it wasn't supposed to be in the beginning. It was just he's going to walk up to the lighthouse in the storm. So sometimes, your imagination kicks in, and that's what I find. The more I'm absorbed in the writing, that you can get into that place. You can feel that, and you can get an idea about kind of a movie playing in your head and what's going to happen. And then those will grow out. Generally, if someone is going to be in their last chapter, I'll kind of have an idea about why, because I know who's going to kill them. It's not a surprise on that. And then generally know how they're going to die, and then the details around that, of the action and how to build suspense in the scene and how to keep people engaged with it, then that all has to come organically at the time. And that usually gets a pretty severe rewrite on the second pass, as you get in it and see how you can make that better. So. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Janine, you got anything else?
Is it not yours? Are there any upcoming?
I kind of made it lost track. This, because I know we're getting close to wrapping up, so I wanted to ask this other one that was unscripted. On your website, another section of it is devoted, it's called Master the Craft.
Yeah.
And I noticed, I was reading through that, and you have like a 4-part series on conventions for authors, and go into those, what that's like, the cost involved, cost benefit, all of that. And I'm not an author, but I found it super interesting. I was reading all through it, and I was just curious, why did you feel like you wanted to write that and have that on your site? Kind of what was the reasoning behind that?
There's a lot. Conventions for me are loads of fun, because writing is a very solitary job. You sit at a desk or a couch or whatever you're sitting at, and you're all by yourself with the story in your head. And then the way the business runs now, you can have no contact with anyone personally. You email off your book, someone emails you back the galley proofs, you send it back out, it gets published. It's all happening theoretically, as far as you know. And it's only when you get to go to a convention that you connect with someone who read your book. And usually they're not coming at you with a knife, so they liked it, which is nice. And then, so they'll come back, and to get that feedback of all of that work that seemed to go on in a vacuum, now someone comes up to you and says, wow, I read this book and it affected me positively this way. And it had that. And I've had some of the Grant Coleman books. I've had parents come back and tell me, I bought this and my kid's an advanced reader, and I thought he'd be able to handle it, and I did, and he loved it. And I've had him come back and buy more books, and it's something that my kid likes. I've had people tell me that certain elements of stories that I did echoed their personal life. That in Q Island, for example, the main character is a woman whose son has autism and gets trapped in this isolation of this zombie world that's been created on Long Island. And I've had people come up to me and say that I read this book and I had to come tell you that my son has autism, my daughter has autism, and you nailed it. You nailed the feelings of being that parent. And it was so nice to have, and this just chokes me up. It was so nice to have someone portray an autistic child positively.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how could you portray them badly? I mean, I don't understand. And they'll tell me, no, people make autistic children the bad, the evil person in the story. Oh, well, I wouldn't read that book. So, but so conventions are fantastic, and they're so rejuvenating that I'll frequently go home at the end of the day after 10 hours on my feet talking to people and all of that, and be excited about writing because I've seen that, I've seen the impact now. So I have a lot of people ask me about that, and I've definitely been to conventions where I've had, especially first-time authors, show up and be tremendously disappointed because it's not free. There's a hefty fee to get that table and to buy your books and to invest in something for the table so it looks good. And I didn't want to dissuade other people from doing it, but I wanted them to have a realistic expectation and to look at it from a business perspective and not just the emotional perspective of, I think I'm going to sit here and new people are going to discover me and I'm going to have a line and I'm going to sign books, because that's not going to happen. So I wrote out all that. I wrote out those posts, and then a lot of first-time authors that come up to me and ask me about it, now I can reference them to it. I can say, I have a lot of information here. Just check my website. It'll tell you everything you need to know. And then my email's right there. Contact me if you have any more questions, because I want more people to do it, and I want them to do it right, and I want them to have realistic expectations and not go home broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was really cool. I'd never seen it, written out or explained like that personally, and so I just found it super helpful. And again, I'm not an author, but I could see how authors would find it super helpful as well. So I thought it was really cool that you did that.
Thank you.
I know we mentioned at the very beginning of all this that there were going to be 3 islands mentioned by the end of this interview, because we got Farallon Island, we got the portal. Was Q Island the third one? I'm just curious.
No, the third one is coming up.
Okay.
So I've got 3 books coming in the future. The first one is coming out July 6th. It's coming from Silver Shamrock. It's called Lambs Among Wolves, and it's the kind of The Exorcist meets the Da Vinci Code, where there is a teenage girl who gets hooked up with an exorcist priest working in France. She comes from America, and she gets embroiled with what he's doing, which is trying to foil a plot by Satan to unravel the entire Catholic Church. So there's demons, and there's possession, and there's all sorts of exorcisms going on, and that's got some gruesome items in it.
Yay!
That's coming from That's coming from Silver Shamrock in July on the 6th. Later in the year, I've got a new Grant Coleman book that I just signed to Severed Press that's called Mammoth Island, and he's shanghaied as part of a mission to go help scientists that have resurrected woolly mammoths from some of the frozen woolly mammoths that you've actually seen real life on the news. And so he goes there, and of course things get out of control. So we've got that. So that's the other island. And then the last one is coming out next year from Flame Tree Press, and that is called Demon Dagger. And that's a story set in Southern California and Los Angeles, where there's a boy who realizes that the evil creatures that he's seeing, he's not crazy. He's actually seeing demons that are walking the earth, and everyone else sees them as humans. But he has this demon sight that allows him. And a mentor takes him under the wing to explain exactly what's happening and why it's happening to him, and the responsibility that comes with that he now has to be one of those people who hunts them because he's the only ones who can see it. And he learns all of that, and after a long period of not having to do anything because he never sees any demons, then as an adult with his own family, the demons start to come back, and they threaten his family. So he has to get back into that business and find out where they are and hunt them down. So that comes out in 2022 from Flame Tree.
Oh, it sounds supernatural-esque.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love Supernatural.
Yes! There we go. My favorite TV show in the whole world.
It is. And, the last season is just, no, come on, guys, please, no, don't stop doing this.
I know.
How many TV shows last 16 seasons and aren't stale by the time they get there?
Right.
No.
Oh, brilliant.
And that list makes me sound way more successful than I really am. So just,
You don't write full time. Have you got like a day job as well, or do you write full time?
No. When I had a day job, it was a 100% travel job. So I was away from home 5 days a week, and every night I literally had nothing to do, so I could write. And now I've retired from that, so now I write full time, and that's so the output has gotten higher.
Yeah.
Have to keep finding venues to publish it.
Yeah. Well, you've got 3 of the best small publishers, I would say. Although I don't think of Flame Tree as a small publisher. I think that they're almost up there with like the big guys because they're just so good.
And they got me. My name is on the Simon & Schuster website with my book. So
I know that must be
whatever happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Flame Tree are amazing, definitely. Okay, right. Just before we wrap up then, first of all, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to tell all of our millions of listeners? Because there will be millions of listeners.
And they'll be listening.
Yeah. Are you happy that we've managed to cover everything that we wanted to go through?
Absolutely. And for all the people that are listening who are readers, I just want to say thank you for still reading books, okay? Yep. Especially thank you, those of you who've read my books, and especially the ones that have given feedback. I can't thank you enough. I often think about how there are, people who have jobs that they might not really love every day, and they go do it, and they come home, and they've got a paycheck, and they take a part of that paycheck, and they spend it on something I wrote, and it's humbling, to do that. So thank you for that, and keep reading, keep reviewing, and keep horror alive.
Definitely. Okay, so finally, where can people find you and the links to your work? Where's the best place for people to find your stuff and to interact with you?
Well, I've got a website, which is www.russellrjames.com. Because there's some guy named Russell James who's actually famous. Took my name and his website. Some photographer, I don't know. Anyway, so that's russellrjames.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but I haven't figured Instagram out yet. So you can get in touch with me any of those ways, or rrj@russellrjames.com if you want to drop an email. The easiest way to see everything that's available, including short stories that I have in collections and things like that, would be to go to Amazon and look at my page on Amazon, and that'll give you links to all of those great things. So
awesome. And we'll make sure that we put all the links down below in the show notes, as the professionals say.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you ever so much. The only thing I'm disappointed about is where's Timothy? He
almost jumped in my lap. He was really close to doing that. And I was looking at him going, don't you do that.
Giving him the side eye.
He checked it out, and then he decided he had other things to do. So.
I've got 2 cats, and they've also got male, like human names, Leonard and Craig. But they never come anywhere near. As soon as they can hear either like speaking or they see the lights and stuff, they're just like, "Vroom, we're out of here." That's
very polite of them to do that.
For sure. I just have the kids that I'm worried are going to bust through the door at any moment. Because that has happened. My son is 3, and he just, comes running in, Daddy, and
there's something important has just gone on, and he needs to share it with you. That's how.
Yeah, very important, Yeah,
okay.
Thank you so much, though. Appreciate it.
I think it's the first time we've had someone that I can tick off horror, Don Doria, Hunter Shay, Disney, and Supernatural. So I feel that we should be besties for life now.
And cats.
And cats. There we go.
So that's it.
That's it. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
This
Bye.
is great. Have fun, both of you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.